Okay, there was an announcement made not that long ago that rocked the kashrus industry, and that is that starting, I think, on January 1st, all OU events and many other kashrus agencies signed on as well, will no longer allow beer without kosher certification. That beer, which used to be in a beverage that did not require certification, all of a sudden now requires certification. And people were very, very taken by this. They were very taken aback by this, that what changed exactly in beer, that all of a sudden beer could be not kosher. So I will tell you, I know nothing about beer other than that I do not like to drink it. But a couple of years ago, a number of years ago, a friend of mine, an old Talmud from when I taught in DRS, reached out to me, and he said, in my role as a member of the Vada Kashrus of the Five Towns, and he said, you should know that there are beers in some of these Five Towns stores that definitely are kashrus problems. And I said, what are you talking about? Beer cannot be a kashrus problem. He said, that's what you think. He said that maybe if you're getting a Budweiser or a Coors, but you're in the Five Towns. No one gets they go for these microbreweries that make these spitzy beers, and you have no idea what's going on in those places. And there is a real kashrus issue. So he ended, this is Rabbi Kivin Naiman, who's a Rebbe in DRS, and he ended up writing up a whole article on it in the Journal of Halacha and Contemporary Society. So I'll just give you some of the highlights of that article. But again, I know nothing about beer, but I'll tell you a little bit of what he wrote and why it is, in fact, a problem for, in many instances, when you have beer without a kosher certification. Meaning, at its root, it should not be a problem. What are the ingredients of beer? It is grain, it is water, it is hops, and it is yeast. None of those, with the possible exception of yeast, none of those pose a kashrus concern. Yeast might pose a kashrus concern because yeast is a fungi that could be propagated and generated by non-kosher ingredients. But we rely on, or we always relied on, the following three tzadim. Number one, that it's most likely it comes from kosher ingredients. Number two, that it's probably batel in whatever final product you have. And number three, the breweries typically will use brewer's yeast, which is almost always kosher. So therefore, we weren't so terribly concerned about that, and therefore none of these ingredients posed a real kashrus concern. So it would seem that beer should be absolutely fine. However, as you look into it and you see that the way that beer is made nowadays, or the way that a lot of the smaller breweries are making beer, you run into a number of problems. So we're going to identify 4 potential problems. Potential problem number 1 is added flavors. A lot of the small breweries and even some of the larger ones will put out certain flavors, will put out certain beers with some amount of flavor in it. And even though the amount of flavoring is somewhat small, but it's what we call in Yeridea a milsa davida l'taiman. The Ramah Simon Sadiches says that of the things that are not batel is a milsa davida l'taiman, just like a davar shebeminyan and just like a davar sheish l'matirin. Right, there are certain things that are not batel. So that which is put in dafka to give tam is also not going to be batel. So therefore, that could affect the kashrus of the beer. Now, it should be noted that not every time you see the name of something that sounds like another ingredient, is it really another ingredient? Meaning, sometimes you'll be drinking wine, Kiddush wine, and there's a lull in the conversation, so you read the back of the bottle of the wine, and the back of the bottle says that what you are tasting is, it tells you what you're tasting. You're tasting oak and cherries and a hint of pomegranate and whatever. And you think to yourself, they put oak and cherries and pomegranates into this wine? No, they put no such anything into the wine, but a sophisticated palate might detect a little bit of flavor that's similar to these various items. So a lot of times the label of the notes of almonds and whatever, there's no almonds in your wine, but nevertheless, so with beers it's the same thing. So sometimes it will say you'll detect a hint of citrus or whatever, but it doesn't really mean that. But other times there's actual flavor into it, and in addition to that, the integrity of the label label is not so regulated. Meaning, there's a lot of freedom for the breweries to write pretty much whatever they want to write on the label. For example, Rabbi Naiman points out that there's a label of a popular beer that says aged on cherries. So you picture that someone went to the supermarket, bought a pound of cherries, and then just aged the beer on the cherries, had it sitting on the cherry. What could be wrong with that? But that's of course not what they do. What they do is they make a cherry puree. How they make the cherry puree, it will probably involve some level of heat. It certainly involves deep hitting the cherries and crushing up the cherries. What equipment did they do that on? All of these things become a question. So added flavors is problem number one. Once you have breweries that are dealing with things that are not kosher, you now have to worry about equipment, even when you're dealing with a beer that is kosher, because if it's produced on non-kosher equipment, then that obviously can be a problem as well. So could ruin the kashrus of any beers that are on that run. And you have to figure out if the beer was made on the main equipment or was run on separate equipment. Meaning, in Anheuser-Busch, they have equipment that's probably for the main beers that they make, or for Coors, or for Coors is not nice, but whatever it is, for all the main big breweries, there's no way they're using the same equipment that they make their main beers on to make these smaller. They have separate equipment for that because they just produce so much of the major, of the typical beer. But for smaller breweries, for craft breweries, which are all over the place, I think if you're a tourist in New York and you want to take a tour of Brooklyn, there's not a tour of Brooklyn that exists without visiting a craft brewery. It's like one of the things you need to see. When you come, they're all over the place. So for these smaller breweries that sell much, much less, so it could be that they're using the same equipment. A third issue is that sometimes, in addition to flavorings into mainstream beers, sometimes a beer company would like to do something that is very eye-catching. They'll run a flavor that seasonally sometimes that will be it will grab attention. So they'll have oyster stout, or they'll have shellfish or scallops or other things, or bacon and sausage beer, and they call these breakfast style beers because if you're the kind of guy that gets drunk at breakfast, you might enjoy these beers. So they have that is another issue that can come up. Also, several beers have lactose, which is a milk sugar that's added to the brew or to the fermentation, and the milk sugar doesn't ferment out. It gives the beer a sweeter taste when it has lactose. So historically, lactose was added to some stouts, but now they're using it a lot more, according to Rabbi Naiman. And most kashrus organizations do require a hashgacha on lactose. Lactose is a byproduct of whey and could have kashrus concerns. Meaning so the cheese that's used to make the whey could be cultured with animal rennet. You have issues that can come up with lactose. So given that it's there for the purpose of sweetness, it's a milsa davida l'taima, and therefore is not going to become batel in the beer. And if you were to verify that kosher lactose was used, then you have an issue of, well, is it dairy? And if it's dairy, how does that go with the meat board at the Shalom Zachar that you're having? Now I'm from the 5 towns. You don't have a Shalom Zachar without a meat board. So there's no such thing as a part of a Shalom Zachar. So how are you going to have a beer that has some dairy ingredients? Now, lactose is meimei chalav, which minat Torah is not really milichigs, but we are machmir midrabanan not to have it together with meat, and therefore that could pose a kashrus concern when you're having it together with meat. A final concern when it comes to beer is beer-wine hybrids, or beer that is aged in wine barrels. Grapes are a very popular ingredient that's added to produce beer, or a beer-wine hybrid. They will refer to it as brewed or fermented with grapes. And they add wine grapes to the raw grain, and they have them ferment together. Or sometimes the wine or the grape juice is added directly to the beer. And that could be a problem, obviously, whenever you're dealing with wine. It could be a problem of stam yenam. So that's something you want to be careful of as well. The Shulchan Aruch asers in the Shulchan Aruch in Yeridei, in Kuf Lamed Daled, valid, asers any beverage that's made by non-Jews that usually has wine mixed in. And the Shulchan Aruch says that you shouldn't buy beer or any other beverage from a non-Jew if there might be some wine dregs in it. So that has increasingly become a concern. The Ramah writes it does become batal b'shishim. So if there's shishim, then it's okay, unless it's avida l'taima, in which case it might be avida l'taima. There's a famous back and forth about scotch and whiskeys that have wine, that are blended or that are aged in sherry casks and things like that. A famous exchange between Rav Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Taitz, Zichronam Livracha. Rabbi Taitz was machmir on this issue, and much to his dismay, Rav Moshe would not be machmir on the issue. Rav Moshe kept saying, yeah, okay, so Bal Nefesh should be machmir, but it's really mutter. And Rabbi Taitz shot back, no, but it should be aser. Yeah, Bal Nefesh should be machmir, but it should be mutter. A lot of fascinating shuvas back and forth, which I just very, very much oversimplified. There is a Beferish Gemara in Mesach Savod Zar and Avlam Gimlim Beis that says that Ravina allowed Rabbi Chia to pour beer into a kli that had previously had stam yenam in it. So it would seem from that Gemara that it's mutter. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes this Halacha that you're allowed to put water or beer into or any beverage into a kli that had previously had non-kosher wine. But the question is why? Why is that mutter? So the Taz on the spot in Kuf Lamed Zayin, Sivkat and Zayin, the Taz writes that the minimal flavor of the wine that gets absorbed into the barrel walls that may come out into the beer will not make the beer taste better. It will be nosein tam lefkam. It will make the beer worse. And nosein tam lefkam is mutter. So says the Magen Avram. But if einayim roos, if einenu roos, if we're able to see very clearly, the Magen Avram writes in Hilchos Pesach that the wine imparts a positive flavor, that it's nosein tam l'shvach, then you don't have the heter of the Taz. Then you're going to have a problem. If they're aging these beers in these wine barrels, v'dafka, because they think it imparts a positive flavor, then you have a problem. The Shach has a different explanation. The Shach writes that the reason we're not concerned about the stam yenam is because whatever flavor there is going to be batel. That would, assuming that that's true, that would be true regardless of whether it's nosein tam lefkam or nosein tam l'shvach. A final concern, I know I said there will be four, but the fifth and final concern is chametz shavar lava pesach. That if you have these small breweries and some of them are owned by Jews, so then you're going to have a problem oftentimes, or even a beer distributor. So you'll oftentimes have an issue of chametz shavar lava pesach. So you want to make sure that a kashrus organization will be on the lookout for that. So if you buy a regular, Budweiser beer, the chances are you are not having anything that is not kosher, right? But if you're going to start getting into the microbreweries and the whatever they call it, the smaller breweries in different places, or you get into the fancier flavors and the more interesting types of beers that are out there, so you can have a problem. And therefore, it seems as public policy, it makes a lot of sense that if there could be a problem, that organizations that don't know any difference, just see plain beer and they assume that everything's okay because they're unaware of the problems. So it's better that we have oversight of these things, and that's probably why the OU and others have changed their policy. I saw a meme someone sent that it had a picture of meat, of lab-grown meat, and it said, "What they promised us. This is kosher and pariv. What we got, beer is treif." Right? Meaning, okay, so sometimes we think we're making advancements and everything's going to be kosher, and no, okay, that's how life goes. Okay, have a great day, everybody. Yeah, at OU catered events, they're going to require. Yeah.